Still on the search of that one true love? On the limbo in this crazy world of dating, marriage, relationships? Well, listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Relationship Podcast, your one-stop podcast for everything about relationships. Hello and welcome to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and I wanted to share with you, thank you for being with me. I'm going to talk about that new relationship, or that old relationship, but that relationship and how they can't read your mind. It's about sharing who you are and your thoughts, and that's very important. You got to let people know what you're thinking. We can't read your mind. I know it's very easy to think that just because you think it, they can imagine it. And we're seduced into believing those kinds of things about other people, because especially when you come to the new relationship, when they're in the honeymoon phase, it just seems like you're just locked in step and everything just sort of works because we're just filled with all of that love and emotion and everything that's going on with it. But you'll see that as relationships progress, it doesn't stay in that stage. And part of the reason is because that's just that honeymoon phase. That's all part of the natural thing of courting and of mating. You have to have that in order to start a bond. And then once you get that rhythm, that routine established, you get into that place, and then some of the other things have to then start a backfill. And that's where the communication comes in, and that's where there's things about keeping the spark alive, and it's usually relating to that honeymoon phase. And you'll find that one or both will kind of get out of that practice, but it's something that you might want to learn to be conscious of so as to help your partner not to feel dismissed or unappreciated. And that's something that seems to happen to a lot of us. So I'm going to talk about that and a few other things, but I'm going to take a really short break here, and we'll be right back.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now, don't bother, what's hot on Netflix, and everything in between. That's GSMCpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Hi there, and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcasting, and I'm your host, John Johnson. And in this particular episode, I'm obviously going to be talking about relationships, but when you get into relationships, what's one of the things that you expect to have happen? You expect to have peace and harmony and all of those good feelings that come with wanting to be with someone. But, there comes a part where there's the responsibility of communicating what your needs are so that you can get what I just mentioned about having the fun, about having the enjoyment, the appreciation. And when it comes to knowing what your needs are, that is critical. And women, I'm talking to you. Men are not really that complicated in terms of wanting to be pleasers. They obviously have their needs, and they will communicate those to you in some sort of way. But when it comes to figuring out what women want, some guys are obviously better at it than others, and that's why they tend to be very desirable. And sometimes it can really multiply into a thing that they tend to have a fair share of companionship. But what I'm really wanting to relate to is the idea that men can't read your mind. They think they can. And oftentimes what they're good at is they're good at getting an introduction. They can be really a sweet talker. They can bring lots of gifts, the flowers. They can be real romantic and that idea. But then, there's a point where it's not about just being generic, because we all like those kinds of things. We all like feeling like we're the center of attention. But when it comes to communicating your specific needs, that's going to be based on your life's experience. And when those things are not communicated, then you're going to run into problems. You're going to run into miscommunication problems, misperception things, and that's where the friction starts. And that usually happens somewhere after the honeymoon phase, but it's during that honeymoon phase when you really need to be asking the intelligent questions. You want to ask the questions about the background, because everything is really light and it's very new. And you want to think about this, because what dating is, this is about learning about someone else. This is about finding out about some of those nuances. And then, remember what you've been told, okay? It's not about forgetting this stuff, because if you don't remember, then, how can you verify these things? Because I think in our minds, whenever there becomes that moment where there's some doubt as to what this person is about, well, remember what you've been told and then compare it. Because what I believe is that down the road, a leopard doesn't change his spots. If he's communicating something to you in the beginning of the relationship, it should probably be that. And if it's not somewhere else, then there should have been some sort of correction. There should have been some sort of discussion about why the change. Or at least if you bring it up, then you need to hear something reasonable about it. And the same thing for a guy that's listening to this, because, certainly this leopard changing the spots thing applies to both situations. But it's a perfect opportunity to ask the questions about their background. You want to know, what kind of experiences they've had. And this isn't about dishing on the ex and complaining about something the ex did, because really that to me is a red flag. You can learn a little bit about a person, but you should be over the ex. That shouldn't be the topic of conversation. And I know oftentimes it becomes one, because you kind of get to commiserate. You can probably show that you've shared the same sorts of experience, and that might even indicate that you're really the same kind of person. So maybe this is a good person for you to be with, but you want to hear what the person is saying. And you also want to learn something about their conversational style. And I think this is really, really important to somebody. If you're a nurturing individual and you want to build your relationship with somebody who's equally nurturing, listen to the conversational style. Determine, do they share the conversation with you, or do they tend to dominate it? Because if you're a person who felt like you lacked nurturing, and then you're coming into the next relationship and you're so over the top, you don't even give the other person an opportunity to speak, I think you're going overboard. You need to learn how to be a good listener as well as a speaker. But let's say you're the woman and you're trying to figure out, okay, this guy seems like a really nice guy, but I want to learn something about, is he really as good as he says he is? Why did he break up in the last relationship? I think that's a fair question to ask. Again, you can learn something about somebody from their past experiences. And if it parallels something that you're familiar with, then, maybe that's a good sign, if it's on the good side. If it's something that you've seen that there's some toxic habits going on in there, you definitely want to be on the listening side, because you want to see that stuff will surface. That conversation can be very important, that you can begin to ask questions to figure out, okay, if there's some toxic things going on, especially if it dips in the areas that you've had some relationship trauma. You don't want that. You don't want a repeat of that. And, if you have a habit of going back to the same old kind of guy that tends to bring the same old kind of problems with you, then you really need to take a step back and think about what you're doing that's creating these situations over and over again. One of the podcasts I just completed, I was talking about enablers, and maybe that's a situation that fits you. So if you're attracting the same kind of problems over and over, you definitely need to see the stop sign, look at yourself, Get some coaching around that so that you can change what you're doing, because you are obviously creating problems in your life. And there's no reason that you should continue to do that over and over and over, because this is supposed to be a learning experience. You're wanting to build on something valuable, not keep having the same problems over and over. Now, what life gives you is an opportunity to learn. If you didn't learn it this first time, you'll get another opportunity. So let's maximize the value of your time and moving forward. And it may be, and again, this is a good thing about dating. You may find something about this individual that really works for you, and then you may find that the red flags say, oh, no, stop. And, you're doing them a bit of service, too, by sharing with them, what you've discovered, and it may give them an opportunity to really take a step back and look at their life and do something different. And it could be simply something that just these two people just don't match. They're just not a good fit. And they can go on and find other people who they're more compatible with. So, it's not always to say that everybody needs to be fixed. Sometimes it's just that these two people just don't, their relationship styles don't work. I mean, if you got one person that's really loud and another person that's really meek and really soft, they're probably not going to be real comfortable with this loud, boisterous person. But it's up to you to determine that, and you need to know something about yourself to take a stand. And sometimes it is about experimenting. You might find that that's something that really interests you, and it might help you bring you out of your shell. See? So there's all kinds of opportunities for you to experience your life and do it in a safe and healthy way. So I would encourage you to do that. But again, asking questions, knowing what your needs are, verbalizing that, asking those things, and getting a response. Listen to the response. Because if you don't have your listening ears on, you can't blame somebody else when things don't go right, because it's important to listen. And this is probably one of the key things when we're talking about our needs, waiting for the response and how people would ask them, because there's lots of hypothetical things we could talk about. And I'm just going to speak about this generically. There's a lot of hypothetical situations, and there's obviously a lot of conversations that are filled with that kind of thing. If such and such happened, well, what would you do? And these answers oftentimes are, I would like to think that, they're authentic. It's hypothetical, so it may be based on, one's past experience. But, how often is somebody going to really answer that question in a way that's going to turn you off? If they're trying to build a relationship with you, they're probably not going to say something that's going to turn you off, because that's usually a conversation stopper. But by the same token, think about it. Think about thinking of authentic questions and scenarios and something that's real time. One of the things that I like to watch is when I'm with somebody is how do they treat other people around them. And women will say this, that they like to be with a guy who is laid back and low key. And that sounds attractive. I think what they're afraid of is some guy who is overbearing and is always pawing at them and stuff. But think about it. Woman, if you want somebody that's laid back and low key, what are you really asking for? And explain that when you get on the date. That it means that you want someone who does have the capacity to be assertive, but somebody that's not always pawing on you. Because when you ask for laid back and low key, you may get Mr. Couch Potato, and that's not attractive at all. But if you're a guy and you're reading that in a profile, it's really confusing to guys to see that and think, okay, well, what is she really talking about? Because I think that's a real important thing. And quite often women, they say they want a guy that's funny and a lot of really generic kind of comments, statements. And I'm really talking about something that you would see in a profile. So I've sort of gone off on a tangent here, but my mind jumped to that because I can remember talking to women and making comments about various capacities that men have to be, different individuals. And I think it's natural for a guy to try and approach things, from various angles, because that's what men do. They're trying to solve the problem. And women can oftentimes be very confusing when they say they want a guy that's funny, they want him to be low key, and it's like, okay, well, again, the low key guy seems to me to be the guy that's the couch potato, who seems to not be very engaging when you want somebody that's amped up a little bit. So you're gonna have to be real specific, and when you describe that, then also be willing to be a listener to how a guy would respond to your questions. Okay, I mean, I've said that over and over, but I really mean the listening part, because it's really easy to get caught up in the honeymoon phase where everything is hunky-dory, everything is great, and you're wanting this thing to work out, but you're wanting it to work out more than you are doing the listening. And it tends to begin and keep you in the space of having a bad, maybe a not so good relationship when somebody better could come along a lot sooner. And I think this thing about, and a lot of people say, they talk about, well, when they're in a new relationship, it's, how often do you contact, how often do you communicate? And some people play the hard to get kind of thing. I can't believe people still do that, but yeah, it's sort of a gamey kind of thing. You don't want to seem too interested, but then, but it's about opportunity. If you wait too long to contact somebody, I'm sorry, that opportunity's gone. I mean, we're in relationships now, or at least because you have the access to the internet, it's like speed dating. And you have to come across as being interested and showing that you're interested and applying yourself, because if you wait too long, I mean, somebody else will show up. And then you get the situation where, you have so much attention, it's kind of hard to pay attention to everyone. And then people pick up on that energy and you're liable to get lost, brushed by the wayside. So if you're having interest in somebody, show an interest and move forward on that. Because if you take too long, somebody else is going to move on in. Okay? And that goes both ways, men and women. So I'm going to take a short break right now, and we're going to come right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Hello and welcome back to Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I'm your host, John Johnson, and I'm going to talk a little bit about sex in your relationships. When you're beginning a new relationship, clearly sex is something that's going to get discussed, and I'm going to talk about safe sex. It's not a new topic. We've heard about AIDS, we've heard about herpes, we've heard about chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, all those kinds of things, but it still bears repeating that being safe means using protection, having the conversation about, are we monogamous? And when that becomes part of your conversation, then you're conscious as to what you're doing with your partner. What you and your partner do is between you and your partner. But what you don't seem to realize oftentimes is when you begin to have a physical relationship with your partner, you're having a relationship with all the other partners that person has had. So then and therefore, it becomes prudent to ask these kinds of questions so that you are safe. There are drugs out there now that make having AIDS the way it used to be, that it was a death sentence. Thankfully, we have medication out there that has changed that, and it has been able to extend the life of people. And partly because of that, I think sometimes there is less of an emphasis on being safe because there seems to be a medical cure, and for lack of a better word, there is a medical remedy, let me say that, to protecting you, to extending your life. Well, because when these things are life-threatening, it tends to get our attention a lot more. And lo and behold, when AIDS first broke out, it was definitely a death sentence. I can't say that there were too many people that actually survived it, and of course there are people that have. But we're now at an age when we don't hear about it as much, and there's obviously a lot of research that's gone on for that. And because they studied it, they learned, scientists have learned a lot about viruses, how they multiply, how we can deal with those things, and how we can extend people's life and a quality of life. But the thing about sexuality, it's obviously very important to us as human beings. That's what we're going to do. We're going to have sex. There's pleasure around it. And because it's one of the pleasure centers, sometimes we're not very careful about the choices that we make. And this is why you have to really get ahead of that and begin to think how you're going to approach that before you get in the situation, and then make that contract with yourself so that you don't put yourself at risk. And what I'm getting at here also has to do with getting an AIDS test when you have a new partner ahead of time. And if you're with a partner in, you're using protective sex for men, that would be using condoms, and there are female condoms as well. And that's more of a barrier, so that prevents the exchange of bodily fluids. Now, when you have things like herpes, which can create open sores at various places of the body, you're not protected from that. A condom doesn't necessarily protect you from that, so it's really important that you ask your partner, and that you become very open to hearing what your partner has to say. It's not about people being dirty or being unclean. Sometimes these things come about to people and they don't know how they started. But it's really important to be open and honest with your partner. When it comes to something like herpes, well, there are people that when they have outbreaks, then they're obviously more susceptible to transmitting that to their partner. Well, you don't want to do that. There are medications that you can take that can limit the exposure time. I believe a cyclovir is one. I've read about it. So there is something that you can do. And again, be an adult about it. It's not something that people should be shamed for anymore. I mean, we have done that kind of thing. We have been ignorant about it as individuals and shaming people, and that tends to force things underground. But by talking about it as an adult, there are medical professionals that really want you to get help. They are there to help you with that. There are clinics out there, and I implore you you can go on to do an internet search, public health clinic, and there are many places in which you can get information. If you're on a college campus, I'm sure that there are posters plastered somewhere. There are guidance counselors who can give you quality information on something like this. And I don't mean to be the hype. I'm talking about bona fide quality information so you can get help. And these conversations are confidential. These things, when you're talking about medical stuff, this stuff is protected. So it's not about somebody going out and spreading your business. Again, that's very unprofessional. But there are severe penalties for people for doing that kind of thing. So they treat it like an adult, treat it like a professional, and that's because you want to get care. You don't want to bury that stuff. And then, when you have a new partner, obviously it's going to be an uncomfortable thing to talk about. But be honest about it, because if you don't, it's going to come up anyway. At some point in time, that conversation is going to be a topic of conversation, because if your partner happens to have an outbreak and they've never had one before, where is the natural place that they're going to look? They're going to look to you as, okay, well, what happened here? And, you can't just claim ignorance. You can't just dummy up and say, well, I didn't know anything about it. That's not going to work. Now you've broken the trust thing, and that is really important that you keep that going on, because I know it's something that you as a listener, that's important to you, is trust. So you need to work on that part and keep it. And if, by chance, if it doesn't work out because somebody is really upset about, the whole thing, well, maybe they weren't the person for you anyway. If you being open and honest with them about something like that tends to freak them out, then maybe they're not the person for you. Sometimes it could be that they may need a moment to get comfortable with it. It may hit them like a ton of bricks. They may take a step back. But if they give it the thought, maybe they can appreciate the fact that somebody's really being open and honest and being vulnerable. And I think vulnerability is something that happens in a relationship that can only happen when you allow it to happen, and one can appreciate that. Some people can. And if somebody can't appreciate the vulnerability, again, that may not be the person for you to be with, because throughout your life, there are going to be vulnerable moments. And it won't be just around sex, but it could be about information. It could be about a loss. You want to cry. You want to express those emotions, those feelings, so that you can get through them, get past them, and then and move on to something else, happier times, or being able to share the good times, those vulnerable moments. Those are really important times too. And you want to share that with somebody that's going to value it. And, we all have our own experience about things. And sometimes we can't always make people who we want them to be. And we have to allow them to come to things in their own time. If there's something that you value about that person and you can hang on to that, and maybe that may bridge the gap to where this is a teachable moment and we can get to the thing where we're sharing these other vulnerabilities and we work through them together. But that's the important thing. But again, I started talking about this because of sexuality and because of being safe when you begin your sexual encounters with your new partner. And it's important. It's really important for you to recognize from your sexual history if you've had risky encounters. Get yourself tested, get yourself checked, get your bill of health so that you know where you stand. Because without that, you're playing Russian roulette, and that's not a game you want to play. Because there's a lot of things you can do that could be done for you if you have something, and sometimes you might have aches and pains and you don't know why the heck you have them. Get them checked out. Get yourself on a health regimen, health program, and figure out what these things are. Get them taken care of. And the other thing is, if you're with somebody who has issues, encourage them to get themselves checked to the doctor. Love them enough to help them really see that they're valuable and that you want the best for them. And because when they are feeling better, they are healthy, they are doing the things for themselves, then they're better for you. Because that's another part of this. And I talk about self-care a great deal. Self-care is so important because you can't take care of somebody else if you're feeling lousy, whether emotionally or physically. You can't take care of somebody else. And I know sometimes we tend to forget ourselves and then focus on other people. But by and large, whatever problem we have, it's going to circle back around, and it's just going to be there for us. And if you don't manage that, then, what good are you? You're not. You really need, you want an example for yourself so that you can then build on it. Because you're loved. You are loved by me. You are loved by your significant others. And you're a wonderful person. So remember that you are loved. You are important. You're worth what it takes to get things right for you. Remember that. Again, this is John Johnson. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Relationships Podcast. I want to thank you for listening. And please, join me next time.